So you want to do some lettering on glassware like this, but what pen do you use? How do you make it permanent? What happens if you screw up? How do you fix your mistakes? Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and in this video, I'm gonna walk you through all of those questions and answers and show you exactly how you can do this hand lettering on glassware. Let's jump right in. Okay, so I've got my wine glass here. This could be any glass. It doesn't have to be a wine glass. It could be a champagne glass, whatever type of glass you wanted to use. And then the other tools you're gonna need are an oil paint pen. So this is a Craft Smart oil paint pen. It could be a Sharpie though. I often use Sharpies. I just happen to have one of these lying around and it works just as well. It has to be oil paint. You don't wanna use water-based paint or acrylic paint. You want to use oil-based. Craft Smart is available at Michael's and it's not very expensive and it comes in different size tips. So this is what I would recommend. And then I have a paper towel, I have a bit of tape, and then this is acetone. You are gonna use this if you need to fix any mistakes, so it's good to have handy. And then the last item on my list is this Stabilo All pencil. It's just a white pencil and it's really good for writing your kind of rough draft on the glass. It's optional because there are other ways that you can do this and I'll touch on that, but I highly recommend having this pencil in your arsenal. It's really one of my most used tools. So that's pretty much it. A glass, a pencil, your pen, paper towel, tape, and acetone. So step one is to make sure that you've cleaned off your glass. So to do that, you can use Windex or you can use your alcohol or you can just wash it in soap and water. I've already done that with this one. I just washed it in soap and water. But the reason is that you want to make sure there's no like coating or anything on it when it comes home from the store, because that means that your paint might not stick super well. Step two is to come up with what your design is going to be. For this one, I'm going to be writing the Mrs. because it's a gift for a bride. If you want to, you could take a piece of paper, you can jot out your design on paper first and make sure that you're happy with it. But I've got a pretty good idea in my head of what I want this to look like and I've done it a million times, so I'm just going to jump right in. So there's two ways you can get your design onto your glass. The first way is you could write it on a piece of paper and then cut it out, put it inside the glass and try and line it up and then tape it in there and you can trace it through. A lot of beginners tend to use that way because it's pretty easy and means you're not going to screw up because you're just tracing. The problem I see with it is if you're using a really rounded surface like this one, sometimes it's really hard to stick the paper in properly and it gets a little bit skewed and then sometimes it doesn't look quite perfect. So my preferred method is using tape and your Stabilo All pencil. So I'm just going to tape off the portions where I'm gonna need guidelines and try and tape it on fairly straight. Adjust it until you're perfectly happy with it. So within these two lines, I'm gonna write Mrs. and then above it, I'm gonna write the. So I'm gonna put the tape just for Mrs. right now because I need to remove that top piece to write the, and we'll do that part afterwards. So once you have the layout of what you want for your tape, you're going to take your Stabilo All pencil and draw on your rough copy essentially. Actually, right off the bat, I noticed that I want this to be a little bit bigger. So you can barely see the pencil on the glass. It's just enough to give you a little bit of a guideline when you start with your marker, your paint pen. Okay, and if you're not happy with it, that's where your paper towel comes in handy. Just rub it off and try again. Keep doing this until you're happy, perfectly happy with the way that your design looks. That's better. Okay, then you can take your tape off and touch it up a little bit because I had some parts of my letters that were bouncing down below where the tape was and it got cut off. So I'm just touching this up to be 100% perfect and I'm pretty happy with that. It's hard for you guys to see. So now I have my Mrs. and I want to write the word the, and I'm going to write it in block letters. So again, I'm going to put my tape on. Having the tape is really helpful when you're doing block letters as well. All right. So my design is all set. I am ready to go with my pen. So I have, again, my Craft Smart oil paint pen here. I've shaken it up already and I've depressed it so that the tip is really nice and wet. And I'm basically just gonna go over exactly what I did. Now, the one thing I wanna point out here is if you've never done faux calligraphy, make sure you go check out this video because I have a whole video all about how to do that and it's really important for this. So as I go here, I'm just tracing over what I did originally. And my recommendation is don't wait too long to go back and thicken the parts that you want to be thicker, because it's a lot easier to do this when your pen is really still wet. So I usually do 1 or 2 strokes and then go back and thicken before moving on. I'm pretty happy with the way that that looks so far. And now I'm just gonna add my word "the." And realistically, it probably would have been smart to do that first so that my hand doesn't risk touching this. You could wait for it to dry if you want to, but I'm pretty confident with just resting my palm here. Okay, now is a really good example. That E, after I pushed down on the tip of my pen to get it flowing a little bit better, that E got a little bit too saturated and thicker than the rest. So this brings me to the next question, which is how do you erase if you make a mistake? So what I have is acetone, which we talked about at the beginning. Could be rubbing alcohol too. And you could use paper towel, but I have a Q-tip. I find a Q-tip is really helpful when you're doing small stuff like this little E I messed up. So I just dip it in there and it'll come right off. Just make sure that you use the dry end of the Q-tip to really wipe off that spot before you try and write on it again. And then I'm just gonna take my pen and try again. And there we have it, my The Mrs. Glass. You could keep adding embellishments here if you want to. The one thing I will caution you though is try not to get too close to where the lips would go on the glass, because this paint is not considered food safe. So you wanna try and keep it away from where people are actually gonna be drinking from. And now comes the interesting conversation that you've probably been wondering about this whole time, and that is, how do I make this permanent? Now, I'm gonna preface this by saying that this is a handmade product, and I always tell clients that it's handmade. It's never ever gonna be 100% permanent. It is not gonna last forever. So I like to tell people to make sure that if you are ordering a glass like this, that you hand wash it, that you don't scrub the front of it, you're just really gently washing it, and that you don't put it in the dishwasher. Again, it's a handmade product. Most people are very understanding of this, and they know that if they're ordering a handmade product, it's not gonna be 100% permanent and perfect. And that's kind of the charm of it. So it's not gonna be perfect. As it is right now though, this pen on here will not come off very easily. Even if you scratch it, like if you were to, this is still a little bit wet, so I don't want to do it, but if you were to scratch right over top of this, it will not come off very easily. And you'd have to really put in some elbow grease and try and chip it off. So you could just leave it like this, but I also do one more step to make things a little bit more permanent, and it just gives me a little more peace of mind. So what I do is I put these in the oven to set the paint on them, and that way it lasts a little bit longer, and again just gives me a little bit more peace of mind that it's going to be a tiny bit more permanent even though it's not 100%. So step 1 is to put your glass in the oven before the oven is hot. This is because glassware like this is not typically meant to be put in the oven and warmed up like a casserole dish would, for example. They're not technically oven grade glass, and so you don't want to shock the glass and make it too hot too quickly because it might shatter. Step 2 is to heat up the oven, obviously, but keep it pretty low. So turn it on to about 200 to 250. You'll see some people say to go higher than that, but again, just what I'm comfortable with telling you, put it lower because you don't want to run the risk of your glass exploding. So 200 to 250 is usually where I stay. Step 3, leave the glass in the oven for about an hour and then come back. And when you come back, step 4, turn off the oven and again, leave the glass in there until it's fully cool. You don't want to pull it out and shock it with really cold temperature right away because again, it could shatter. You definitely still want to tell people not to put it in the dishwasher and make sure they know it's not 100% permanent though. And that's it. You have a perfectly beautiful hand-lettered glass. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, I would love it if you give me the thumbs up button down below. Make sure you hit subscribe because I put out 2 new videos like this every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.